Hello and welcome to episode 2 in this series of the mini barn build. Now in this episode my plan is to get all of the foundations located, get them marked out and dug and get them poured, ready to start the building process. But before I can go about marking out where these foundations are going to be, I really have got to get rid of these tree stumps. Now, if you saw the first episode in this series, I cut these trees down and to be honest, I was hopeful I could leave them in place. I don't know why I thought that, maybe I was just avoiding work, but hey, I've got to take them out, and there's 3 of them, and they've got big roots. But luckily I've got the winch on the front of the ATV, and it takes away a lot of the effort. Now you do still have to dig around the tree to bare those roots and break through some of them, but again with that tension on the winch it really helps to show you where those roots are. Cutting through enough of them and eventually the winch has the power to pull that root ball right out of the ground. It would have been much easier to remove these tree roots using an excavator or a mini digger, but you have to work with the tools that you've got, and what I've got is a spade, a pickaxe and a winch. Well, that was successful. Look at the hole that's made. We'll knock some of this loose soil off here. Roll it down back. Okay, now those tree roots are out of the way, I can really begin to see the area I'm working with for this tiny barn, and in particular for the foundations which I'm working on today for the shed or storage area of that barn. I need to dig down so there's enough clearance between the underside of the subfloor and bare ground, and also making sure that there's no low spots, so any surface water that gets underneath the barn can drain away. Okay, that's good. Now I've got this area all dug off and levelled out, just checking to make sure it actually falls away so any moisture that gathers underneath the store area or the shed can actually run away. Now I've dug down, and you can see just how sloped that driveway is from this angle. I've dug down in that corner there and then levelled it out so that the foundations of the subfloor are below grade. I need the finished shed floor to be 150 millimetres or 6 inches above the finished slab of the parking space. So I've done the calculations, worked out how big my bearers and joists are going to be, how much the piles have to stick out of the ground, and that has given me my depth measurement over there. So I've graded this out. I'm now going to get the upside down spray paint and make some accurate marks on where the foundations need to be and dig them in. So what I'm doing here is just remarking the perimeter of the building, and then I can come back and measure from that line where I need my foundation piles to actually be. Well, now I've got the perimeter, or at least the corner of this tiny barn marked out on the ground, I can measure back using my foundations drawing where the piles are going to be, get some X's on the ground, and then I can start digging. Okay, what are we looking at? 212 millimeters. And then centre to centre on those foundation lines, there are 2 rows of piles, 4 piles on each side. They're going to be 1566 on centre. So 1566. And then from the front edge of the building, this is the front of the subfloor here, to the first pile, or pair of piles, moving back 362 to the centre. So 362 centre. And it's to the front of that spray mark. 362. There's one pile. 362. There's a pile. Then 3 more, and they're all on the same centres of 1425. Now all of these marks are going to get rubbed off really quickly when I start walking on this ground, but that's okay. I'm using them purely to mark the location of these piles, and I'll double check the measurements of the piles and the centres before I concrete them in place. And there we have it. 8 pile centres. Now if I extend these lines quite a distance, that will get them beyond the hole I need to dig. And that way, if I kind of lose the location, I should be able to easily get it back. In other words, I shouldn't be able to destroy the entire line by trampling on it. Guess we'll see. And there we have it, 8 locations for 8 piles. Now each one of those is going to be dug to a minimum of 450 millimeters square and a minimum of 400 deep. However, I need to go down to good ground, so we'll keep going until we hit rock. Now I need to go deep enough to go through the soil and into the bedrock below. And from a geotechnical report that was done on this place about 20 years ago when the septic system was put in, rock should be around 400 millimeters, 16 inches below grade. This, however, isn't the rock we're looking for. This is a large rock, yeah, but it's not bedrock. It's just a loose rock in the soil, and there's several of them I've pulled out already. I've got to keep breaking through those, through the soil, until I hit good ground. So I've got to keep going for a little while yet. Well, that's 2 holes dug, just another 6 to go. Now it has become apparent just where the rock seam is, and it means that each of these holes is going to be increasingly deeper than its neighbour. The ones at the far edge there, where the ground really slopes away, they're likely to be quite deep. but we'll see. Right now, I've just got to keep digging and digging and digging deeper and deeper and deeper. Just take a look at this sky the next morning. How stunning is that colour? Now I can promise you there's no colour grading on this. This is exactly how it looked. Really a spectacular sight, but is indicative of a big storm on its way, so better get back on the dig and try and get these finished before that storm rolls in. I think we've hit rock. At last. Right, time for a quick check now to see if this hole is going to be the right size, whether I need to dig any deeper or any bigger. Now I want this pile here to be a braced pile or an anchor pile. I need this to give extra strength to the subfloor and the building it's supporting. The specifications for both of those are a minimum of 350mm square footprint, and here I've got 480 by 480, so well over spec in terms of its footprint. That's good, it's going to spread the load quite well. Now if I wanted this to be a brace pile, the depth has to be a minimum of 450mm deep, and if I want it to be an anchor pile, a minimum of 900. But check this out. I have got 1.4 metres. Now that's more than enough depth to solid ground. Wow, it's going dark really quickly. Check out that storm heading this way. I don't think I've got very long before I get soaked. Right, that's all the tools away. Well, I think I packed away just in time. I can feel the rain starting right now. So I think that's it for today. I'm going to get back onto the computer and resolve a couple of design issues now that I've got the height set. Okay. Well, I've just about finished digging these 8 holes for the piles for the foundation for the storage shed, but take a look at this one. A little bit more work to do here. You can see that white pipe running through. Now that is for the septic system. It runs from the house to the septic tank, and clearly I can't put the weight of a building through the concrete foundations on top of that pipe. Any potential settlement could cause it to crack, and that's going to be an impossible job to then repair. And you can actually see by the paint spray marking I've got here that the hole is offset slightly to the right. So fortunately I can move this hole over to the left a little bit. It'll get me away from that pipe. I can put a plywood shutter in there to stop the concrete foundations going onto that pipework. A little bit of time just working on this hole, getting this perfected. Then I can take a measurement of the depth of each of these holes, work out what length piles I need, and go and get some suppliers. So first I want to set the laser height to be in line with the top of this wall. This is finished ground level. Okay, now I'm just going to put some storyboards on the corners of these batter boards. And the storyboard is just going to show me where finished ground level is going to be. It's going to show me where the top of the piles are going to be. And it's going to show me finished floor level of this storage shed here. And that way, if I put it on at least 2 of the batter boards, I've always got that to refer to as I'm building. So I've determined that this wall here is actually 20mm higher in this back corner than it is the front. I've gone for the intermediate because I'll be taking this wall out and rebuilding it where I need it to be down this line here. So I've set the laser to the distance I want the finished height of this storage shed above the finished ground level, and I've just got to get that to be in line with this. Bang on. So I can go over to my batter boards, spray paint it, mark through the spray paint. That way it's going to be really clear and easy to see. Okay, now I've established where my finished floor level is. I'm going to add a few more marks here. Just as a reference, I've got my 20mm thickness there. That's going to be my floor. And I've got 140, which is my joist. Another 140, which is my bearer. That's going to be the top of the pile. Now, when I take a measurement from the finished floor level all the way down to the bottom of the hole, which I've dug ready for the pile, I really want to calculate how long that pile needs to be. A few things I need to consider. First off, I have got a floor, sheet flooring. Underneath the sheet flooring, we have got a joist. And underneath the joist, we have got a bearer. And underneath the bearer, we've got a pile. The pile is going to come down through into the hole like this and stop shy of the base. We've got 100 mil of concrete underneath the pile. We've got whatever the pile length is, that's what we're trying to calculate. And then I've got the bearer, the joist and the floor. Floor's 20 mil, joist is 140, the bearer is also 140. So 140, 140 and 20 plus 100, add all those together, we get 400 millimeters. So this is going to be whatever this measurement is minus 400 equals the pile length. So get to the holes, take this depth floor level to the bottom of the hole, reduce it by 400 millimeters, and that'll tell me what length pile I need to go and buy. And while I'm at it, just take some measurements of all of the holes. They're all slightly different and they're all very different depths. So I want to calculate just how much concrete I'm going to be needing. And because these 6 here are deeper than 900 millimeters, they can become anchor piles. And that's good. That gives this substructure a whole lot of strength. I'm using a 5-to-1 mix for the foundations of these piles. That's 5 parts aggregate sand, 1 part cement. And building code in New Zealand calls for the posts to have 100 millimeters of concrete underneath them. And this is a really sensible detail. It's going to spread the load of the building over the footprint of the concrete foundation, which is considerably more than the surface area of the pile. And it's also going to prevent the pile from acting like a straw and sucking all of that ground moisture up through the end grain. There's no worms or insects here. I'm not digging, I'm filling the hole in. I spent 3 days digging in it, now I'm filling it in. Is that right? You can find your own food. So now I've got that first 100 millimetres of concrete down in the bottom of the hole. I'm ready to put the posts or piles in place, brace them, and then finally concrete them in place. But before I do that, I have calculated the length of piles, as you've seen, but I want to double check those measurements. I don't want to go cutting my piles up into pieces and then find out that they're actually too short. So now's a good opportunity just to quickly double check my measurements. I've got the laser set up to the height of the top of the piles. I'm going to read my reference numbers from my drawing and see if that's what I've actually got. Now, because I've gone slightly over 100 millimetres of concrete in the bottom of these holes, those piles ought to be slightly shorter than I had originally calculated. And that's okay. I just want to make sure that I'm in the ballpark. So 630, that means I've got 130 millimetres of concrete in that hole, just over the minimum of 100. That's all good. Now the material I'm using for these piles is sold as pile material. It's H5 treated, so in the ground durability of over 50 years. Try not to fall in the hole. Now the material I'm using for these piles is sold as pile material. It's H5 treated, so in the ground durability of over 50 years. Measures 125 millimetres square, 5 inches square, weighs quite a lot, and I'm going to get these cut to length now that I've double checked all of my numbers and get them dropped in. Now the 100 mil depth of concrete that I put in earlier today really hasn't gone off. And if the weight of these piles starts to sink into that wet concrete, I will have to take them out and wait until tomorrow. But I'm going to try this one. This is the longest pile, 2.4 metres. I'm going to drop it in that far corner there and just see how well it settles into the concrete. And if it does, I'll cut all my piles today and then install them tomorrow. Well, as long as I don't manipulate that too much, that's not going to settle down into the concrete. So I think I can go ahead and get all of these cut and then try and get these braced and ready to concrete in the morning. Now, when you do put the piles in the ground and concrete them in, they're always going to be longer than you need. And so once they're set, chop them to the right length. And so there's always a raw cut surface on the top. The bottom surface, the surface in the hole, ought to be one that's been treated because the chemical treatment to this timber was done after it was milled and cut to length. And if I go ahead and chop the end off, that's a raw, unfinished and untreated, potentially, piece of timber. Now I've bought piles longer than I need because it's cheaper to buy a long piece and cut it to make 2 piles than it is to buy individual pieces of timber for each pile. I need to make sure though when I cut these that it's the treated end that goes in the hole and it's the untreated end that sticks up out of the ground. 1950. 750. Right, I'm going to spend a bit of time now just plumbing this first pile up, making sure it's the right distance from the line, the string line, which of course is the perimeter of the building, making sure it's the correct distance, get that plumb and braced, do the same to the tall one down here, and then I can run a timber between them and get these intermediate piles correctly spaced on the correct centres, 14-25 centres. Right, well, I've got my foundation drawing. I'm ready to set the position for that first pile. I just need to check a couple of things. So from the building perimeter, which is what the string line represents, I need to come back off the face 300 millimeters. And then from the long string line, the length of the building, I need to come back 150. Now, because I'm referencing all these other piles off of this one, this has to be perfectly right and has to be double checked it's in the right position. Otherwise, they'll all be in the wrong place. So now it's firmly fixed. Take another measurement from the corner of the pile, or the face of the pile, out to the string line. Double check we've got our numbers that we were after. Now this one is 150. And we've got 155. Don't know if I'm happy with that. I think we're going to move it. It's not difficult to do now. Well, it is starting to get dark, but I think I'm just going to try and get a horizontal beam across here just to support each of these piles and keep them plumb and keep them spaced correctly. And then tomorrow I can do the same on the other 4 piles and get the concrete footings poured. Now, the only reason I'm trying to get this horizontal or level is so that the centers of these piles are actually accurate. It doesn't need to be perfect, just needs to be close enough. And that is close enough. Right, I think that's it. It's too dark now to carry on. That's plumb, but I don't know if it's 150 millimeters away from the string line. I suspect not. So I managed to get this pile braced last night and get it plumbed vertically, but now I'm measuring from a string line. It's actually 190 millimeters. It needs to be 150. So I've got to pull it over slightly. You have to remove the brace, pull it over 40 millimeters, replumb it and check again. It's perfect. Oh no. Got it. So I've got this horizontal brace in place. I've got the first short pile braced plumb and level. I've got the end tall pile braced plumb and level. I've got my indicator marks on here where these 2 piles need to go. All I need to do now is get those plumb, lined up with the marks, and this one is set. Do the same to this one, and then we can pour some footings. Now the situation I've got here is that these piles are perfectly straight and in line with each other, but these two in the centre, which are only braced with this horizontal beam, they're actually not plumb, they're not level. So I want to put this brace in place to just pull this over. But when I do pull it over, I still need to make sure that these piles are the correct distance away from this perimeter string line. So what I'm going to have to do is brace them plumb, then check the measurement, rather like I did on that end pile there, and then make the adjustments afterwards. So we're looking for 150. I've actually got 150, so it's the bottoms of these that need to be pushed out. So I think what I'm going to do is pin that in place and then just try and kick these over. That's good, and that's good. 150. 152. I'm happy with that. 2 millimeters out, 1/16 of an inch. It's all good. I've got nothing for you today. Nothing for you today, all right? Now, so 1,700 edge to edge. Hold the end of the tape. Hold the end of the tape. Come on. Oh, be like that then. So I'm trying my best not to waste material here, so I'm actually using my joist material as bracing. So I've cut it to the exact length my joists need to be. And while I've got them out here, I'm just going to mark where the crown is, where the timber bows ever so slightly, and use that as the top surface of the joists when I come to use them as joists. Just put a little witness mark so I know roughly where level is. That was your help, was it? Well, thanks. That's all the bracing complete, all 8 piles sitting on 100 millimeters or more of concrete, ready to be fixed in place. Once the hole is filled with concrete, spending some time just troweling the mix into a very slight peak coming up to the post. And that way, any surface water that runs through this way will run away from the post rather than soak in towards it. Right, time to strip off these braces and then I can measure these piles for height and chop them down. Spending a few moments just raking up the job site really is time well spent. Now this is going to save me from rolling my ankle as I try and build the subfloor, but also I'm going to be putting down a damp-proof membrane, and any of these rocks or sharp bits of concrete would potentially pierce that. So making sure it's flat and smooth is going to actually help me out in the next stage of the build. When I'm starting to go a little bit darker, I can set the laser up to the height that these piles need cutting to, and it'll project a laser, a green line, right away across all of these 8 piles. That'll make it really easy for me to mark and then cut them to the right height. So the detector is telling me that I'm perfectly in line with the laser. This indicator mark is in line with my mark on the storyboard, and you can just about make out the green laser line running through here. As it goes darker, that'll become more visible and I'll be able to see it across all of these piles. So now I just wait until it goes darker and I can see that green laser. And the final thing I need to do to these piles is just to take a chamfer off the back edge, and I'll show you why shortly. But I want to make sure that these are still in line with each other before I measure back and make my cut. So I'm just going to wrap the string line around, just pulling off this top corner here, and then if I pull this line across to this pile here, put some tension on the line, pull it to the corner, and we should see all 4 piles should be perfectly in line with each other. So I want to cut a scarf joint cut through here, leaving just enough of the pile as a bearing surface for the bearer to sit on. And the bearer is 90mm wide, so I've marked myself 90mm, squared that across, and now I just need to mark the scarf angle. Now the maximum angle, because of the bracketry I need to use to attach the bearer, the maximum allowable angle from vertical is 25 degrees. So I've set my speed square to 20 degrees and scribe that through, and this here is the material I need to remove. And exactly why we need to do this will become far clearer in the next episode, when we're going to be putting all of the subfloor in place for this tiny barn. Well, that's all the foundations complete for the tiny barn. On this side at least, I've still got to deal with the foundations on the opposite side, but that's going to be a very different style of construction, so that's a problem for another day. As is how I'm going to extend this parking space and retain that. So the next episode, I'm going to be working on the subfloor for this barn and all the strengthening and bracing required for that. It's really starting to rain right now, so I'm going to get finished up for today. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.